The sun was an unforgiving enemy that day, a white-hot blaze beating down on the endless sands of southern Nevada. The desert shimmered like molten glass, its heat waves rising and twisting the horizon. Dust hung in the air, kicked up by 5 armored Humvees, crawling across the dirt road that sliced through the desolation. Inside the lead vehicle sat Captain Sarah Donovan, her eyes hidden behind mirrored tactical shades, her jaw clenched with focus. They'd been rolling for nearly 3 hours, part of a large-scale joint training exercise between multiple U.S. Army units. The objective was simple on paper: convoy movement, coordination, and simulated enemy contact. But the real test wasn't the scenario. It was endurance. The heat, the monotony, the pressure of command, all things that separated soldiers who merely followed orders from those who lived by them. Sarah adjusted her headset. "Convoy check," she said calmly into the comm. "Alpha 1, report. Alpha 1, all good? Alpha 2? A crackle of static, then Alpha 2, rolling smooth. She allowed herself a small nod. The exercise was routine, so routine it almost felt dull. But deep down, she knew the desert had a strange way of turning routine into chaos. The Nevada testing range was notorious for its unpredictability. Equipment failed. Comms dropped. Even the best-planned missions sometimes ended with helicopters airlifting out casualties, and those were just drills. In the rear seat, Private Cole was humming an off-key tune, earning a glare from the driver. "You know," he said between sips from his canteen, "I heard they got actors playing the enemy this time. Real contractors. Ex-special forces types. Supposed to make it feel real." Sarah smirked faintly. "That's the point, Cole. If it feels real, you fight real." The convoy crested a low ridge, and the land ahead opened into a wide basin of sun-baked rock and dry scrub. A perfect kill zone, if anyone had been watching. Sarah instinctively scanned the ridgelines through her binoculars. Nothing. No movement. Just the same oppressive stillness. But then, a flicker, just for a moment. A glint, like sunlight bouncing off glass. "Stop the convoy," Sarah ordered immediately. The Humvees screeched to a halt, tires grinding against gravel. The silence that followed was almost eerie. Lieutenant Mark Harris, the convoy commander, leaned out of the second vehicle. "What's going on, Captain?" Sarah lowered her binoculars slowly. "Something's not right up there." "Thought I saw movement." Harris chuckled nervously. "Relax, Donovan. It's probably a camera lens. The observers are up on those ridges. Remember?" She didn't answer. Years of field experience told her when something felt off, and right now, every instinct screamed that it was. Then it happened. The first explosion tore through the air with the force of thunder. The lead Humvee, just 40 feet ahead of hers, vanished in a cloud of fire and sand. The shockwave slammed into the convoy, rattling doors and sending debris raining down. "I'd. Someone screamed over the comms. Before anyone could react, gunfire erupted from the ridges. Sharp, relentless bursts of automatic weapons. Bullets ripped through metal, kicking up plumes of dust around the vehicles. The unmistakable whistle of rounds passing too close filled the air. "Return fire. Get to cover," Harris yelled, ducking behind his door. Sarah kicked open her own and slid into the dirt, her rifle raised. Adrenaline hit her bloodstream like electricity. This wasn't part of the exercise. It couldn't be. The Army didn't use real munitions in training zones. But the sound, the velocity, the impact, everything about it screamed live fire. She pressed her shoulder against the side of the Humvee, scanning through her scope. She caught sight of 3 silhouettes darting across the ridge, fast, coordinated, moving with precision. No training unit moved like that. her headset filled with static and half-panicked voices. Alpha 2 hit. We've got wounded. I can't see them. Command, we need support. Do you copy? No response. The comms were jammed. Sarah switched channels. Nothing but dead air. Her stomach dropped. Whoever was out there knew exactly what they were doing. She glanced back toward Harris, who was crouched behind his vehicle, shouting into a useless radio. His hands shook. He was trying to lead, but panic had already crept into his voice. We need air support. Another explosion cut him off. A rocket-propelled grenade slammed into the sand just 10 yards from his position, flipping a Humvee onto its side. The shockwave sent soldiers sprawling. Sarah crawled low, dragging one injured private behind cover. His arm was bleeding heavily, but he was alive. Stay with me, she muttered. She ripped open a field dressing and wrapped it tight. Her mind raced. They were pinned, outgunned, and blind. She took a deep breath and forced herself to assess. 5 vehicles at the start, now 2 destroyed, 1 disabled, 2 barely operational. 15 soldiers in the convoy, 3 down, several injured. Enemy unknown, but clearly trained, disciplined, and heavily armed. This wasn't a coincidence. Through the smoke, Sarah spotted a flare streak into the sky. Red, not army-issued. A signal. Whoever these attackers were, they weren't just testing them. They were coordinating. Lieutenant, she shouted. We need to move now. We stay here, we're done. But Harris was frozen, his eyes wide and unfocused. We can't move. We don't know where they are. Sarah felt anger surge through her chest. Then we find out, she snapped. You stay here if you want, but I'm not letting my people die sitting still. Without waiting for permission. She grabbed the comm unit from the wounded radio operator, rewired it to her backup headset, and switched to short-range frequency. All Alpha units, this is Donovan, she said, her voice firm, commanding. We're under live fire. This is not a drill. Form defense perimeter around remaining vehicles and conserve ammo. I repeat, this is real combat. Do not break formation. Her tone sliced through the panic like a blade. Soldiers who seconds ago were shouting now listened. Her voice carried authority, the kind that didn't need a rank to command respect. Sarah peeked over the hood of her Humvee, squeezing off a controlled burst toward the ridge. She saw one of the attackers drop. That was no blank. The sound was too sharp, the fall too real. She ducked again as return fire chewed into the armor beside her head. Her heart pounded, but her mind was clear. She had one objective now, survive long enough to fight back. The air smelled of cordite and burning oil. The desert wind howled through twisted metal. In the distance, flames painted the sky orange. Sarah's unit was scattered, but alive, because of her voice, her movement, her refusal to freeze. Private Cole crawled up beside her, pale and shaking. Captain, this isn't an exercise, is it? She looked at him, dust-streaked face, trembling hands, eyes full of fear, and said quietly, No, Cole, not anymore. A moment later, a bullet ricocheted off the mirror beside them, missing her cheek by inches. She didn't flinch. She'd been through worse in Afghanistan, but this was supposed to be home soil. As another explosion echoed through the canyon, Sarah pressed her back against the Humvee, feeling the heat of the metal through her uniform. Sweat ran down her temple, but her voice stayed steady. Listen up, she shouted to her nearby team. We're not dying out here. We hold the line and find a way out. Follow my orders and stay sharp, because I promise you, whoever's attacking us just picked the wrong damn convoy. And with that, she chambered a new round, rose into the smoke, and fired back, a lone captain turning into the calm center of chaos, refusing to break while the desert burned around her. The ambush had begun, but for Sarah Donovan, it was only the start of a fight. Sandstorm winds howled across the Nevada basin, carrying smoke, dust, and the bitter metallic scent of gunfire. The ground shook with the rhythm of chaos. Short bursts of automatic fire, the dull thud of grenades, the screams of men trying to find direction. Captain Sarah Donovan crouched beside the smoldering wreck of a Humvee, her rifle tight against her chest, pulse hammering in her ears. The ambush had turned their convoy into twisted metal and scattered bodies. Half the radios were fried, the satellite link was down, and they were surrounded. Her earpiece buzzed with static and the faint, panicked voice of Lieutenant Harris. "Alpha 1, this is command. Fall back to the ridge." His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. No confidence, no control. Sarah gritted her teeth. Fall back to where? The ridge was exactly where the gunfire was coming from. She peeked over the hood of the vehicle. Sand peppered her face as bullets slammed into the armor. The enemy was firing from elevated ground, a tactical dream if you wanted to trap a convoy. "Sir," she shouted into the com, "we can't retreat uphill into fire. We need to reposition south toward the dry creek." Static answered, then a sharp burst of shouting. Harris wasn't listening, or couldn't. A young private stumbled past her, clutching his arm. "Lieutenant says to move north." "He says," Sarah cut him off sharply. "He's wrong. Get back behind that vehicle and keep your head down." The private obeyed instantly, too terrified to question her tone. She turned toward the second Humvee, where Harris was supposed to be coordinating fire. He was crouched low behind the rear wheel, radio in hand, eyes wild. Sweat poured down his temples as he tried to raise command. "This is Lieutenant Harris. Convoy Alpha 3 taking heavy fire. We need immediate air support." "Copy. Command, to you." The line went dead. He slammed his fist against the radio in frustration. Sarah crawled toward him, keeping her body low, bullets chewing into the sand around her. "Sir, comms are jammed. They're blocking our frequencies. We have to take control of the perimeter." Harris looked up, face pale beneath his helmet. I can't get through to anyone." "We need to." His words faded as another explosion shook the ground. Shrapnel whizzed past, embedding into the Humvee's frame. The concussion wave knocked him backward. Sarah's ears rang, but she didn't hesitate. She grabbed his vest and pulled him to safety, behind the engine block. "Lieutenant, listen to me," she shouted over the noise. "We can't stay in one place. They've got the range zeroed in. We need to move vehicles and form a defense line." But he wasn't hearing her. His breathing came in short, panicked gasps. His radio hand trembled uncontrollably. His mind was gone, trapped in the spiral of fear every soldier dreads but few admit. Sarah stared at him for half a second, realizing with cold certainty that he was frozen. He wasn't making decisions anymore. And out there, their people were dying for it. A burst of machine gun fire snapped her back. She rolled into the sand, bringing her rifle up, and fired 3 controlled shots toward the ridge. A shadow collapsed behind a rock. "Cover fire," she yelled. "Cole Martinez, lay suppressive fire on my mark." 2 rifles answered immediately, cutting arcs of flame through the dust. That gave her a few seconds, just enough to think. Someone has to lead. She looked again at Harris. He was mumbling to himself, staring at the radio like it might magically start working again. Decision made. Sarah grabbed the field cum from his shoulder, tore the strap off, and pressed it to her mouth. "All Alpha units, this is Captain Donovan," she said, voice steady, crisp. "Lieutenant Harris is down. I'm assuming tactical command until further notice." Form a perimeter around vehicles 3 and 4. They're our last intact cover. We're holding position until I say move. Copy? A pause. Then a voice crackled through. Copy that, Captain. Another followed. Copy. We're moving. Then another. Roger, Donovan. On your mark. Her heart steadied. Order. Direction. The kind that kept people alive. Sarah ducked low, sprinting toward the next Humvee, shouting over the chaos. Keep your fields of fire tight. Check ammo. Stay low. Private Cole crawled beside her, firing bursts toward the ridge. Captain, they're trying to flank from the west. She nodded. Then let's greet them properly. She snatched a smoke grenade from her vest, pulled the pin, and lobbed it wide. A thick gray cloud spread across the sand, covering their left flank. Now move. Go. Through the haze, soldiers shifted positions, dragging wounded, exchanging magazines, their motions becoming more controlled. Sarah's presence steadied them. Her voice had that rare tone, absolute clarity under chaos. Bullets cracked overhead, cutting through the smoke. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the distinct whoosh of a mortar leaving its tube. Her pulse spiked. Down, she screamed. The round landed 50 meters away, close enough to feel the air punch against her lungs. The ground showered sand. When she looked up, one of the Humvees was flipped on its side, its tires spinning uselessly. 2 soldiers were pinned beneath. Without hesitation, Sarah ran toward them. Captain, wait. Cole called, but she was already moving. She slid into the wreckage zone, ignoring the sting of hot sand against her skin. One of the trapped men, Specialist Grant, was bleeding from his leg. The other was unconscious. We're getting you out, she said, crouching low. She jammed her rifle under the frame as a lever, signaling another soldier to help. Together, they heaved. The metal groaned, but didn't budge. She glanced back at the ridge. Enemy fire had slowed. Either they were repositioning or conserving ammo. On 3, she yelled. 1, 2, 3. The vehicle shifted just enough. Grant screamed as they pulled him free. His leg was mangled, but he was breathing. Sarah cut a piece of her own sleeve, made a tourniquet, and tied it off tight. Cole, get him to vehicle 4. She turned back to the second soldier. No pulse, eyes fixed. She closed them with a quiet whisper, then ducked as another volley tore into the ground. By now, the smoke had thinned, revealing the battlefield again. The attackers were methodical, firing in coordinated bursts, never exposing more than a silhouette. Whoever they weren't amateurs. Sarah grabbed her binoculars and scanned the ridge. That's when she saw it, a small drone hovering above, its rotors faint in the light. They're watching us. She raised her rifle and fired. The drone spun out of control and crashed into the sand. The soldiers nearby cheered weakly. Even a small victory meant something. Sarah switched her headset to the emergency channel. Anyone on open frequency, this is Alpha 3 Convoy. We are under live hostile fire northwest of Training Grid 14B. Request immediate support. Coordinates attached. Static. Then silence. She sighed. They were still jammed. The heat pressed down on her. Sweat stung her eyes. Dust clung to her lips, but she didn't slow. She checked the horizon again. Faint movement at the far ridge. Maybe 20 men. Maybe more. They had height, numbers, and surprise. But Sarah had what they didn't. Control. She crawled back to the line, counting her people. 13 still fighting. 3 wounded. 2 dead. Not good odds. But better than none. Ammo check. She called out. Half mags left. Low on grenades. Still got the .50 cal. That last one made her grin. The mounted machine gun still worked. Then let's remind them who they're shooting at. She climbed onto the back of the vehicle, took the .50 cal's handles, and aimed toward the ridge. Her arms vibrated as she squeezed the triggers. The gun roared to life, spitting thunder across the desert. Tracer rounds lit up the ridge line, shredding rocks and silencing several enemy positions. The soldiers around her cheered, their morale flaring. Sarah kept firing until the barrel smoked. Then she ducked back down, breathing hard. Harris was still crouched nearby, staring in disbelief. "Captain," he said weakly, "you just took command of my unit." She looked at him, dirt-streaked, sweat-soaked, eyes burning with purpose. "No, Lieutenant," she said quietly. "I just made sure we still have a unit to command." He had no answer. For the first time since the ambush began, the gunfire faded. A tense silence settled across the desert, the lull before the next wave. Sarah reloaded, wiped blood from her cheek, and looked over her surviving soldiers. "We're not out of this yet," she said firmly. "They think we're broken. Let's prove them wrong." In that moment, with smoke rising behind her and the enemy regrouping ahead, the chain of command had shifted, not by order, but by necessity. Captain Sarah Donovan was no longer following. She was leading. And the desert, once a place of drills and routine, had become her proving ground. The silence that followed the gunfire was thick and unnatural, the kind of silence that soldiers learned to fear. It meant the enemy was moving. It meant they were preparing for something bigger. Captain Sarah Donovan crouched behind a Humvee riddled with bullet holes, her breathing slow and measured. Around her, men reloaded in silence, faces gray with exhaustion and fear. Smoke rose in thin columns from the wrecked vehicles scattered across the desert. The metallic stench of blood and burnt oil hung in the air. They had been under fire for almost an hour. The first shock had passed. Now came the hard part, holding together what was left of her team. Sarah checked her watch. 14:37 hours. They'd left base at 1100. 3.5 hours ago, they were a training convoy. Now, they were a combat unit in a real firefight, 40 miles from help. Lieutenant Harris sat slumped near the rear tire, still clutching the useless radio. His lips moved as he whispered fragments of orders to no one. The man was broken, his mind lost in the storm. Sarah didn't blame him. Combat revealed everyone's limits. His had simply come sooner, but she didn't have time to pity him. "Martinez, ammo count," she called out. "2 mags left, Captain." "Cole? 3, maybe 4. She nodded grimly. They were low, very low. She swept the horizon with her binoculars. The ridgeline was quiet. Too quiet. That wasn't retreat. That was repositioning. "They're moving around us," she murmured, trying to flank south. Corporal Reed, one of the gunners, looked up. "How do you know?" Sarah pointed toward the left ridge. "Dust trails. See that shimmer? They're fast, but the wind doesn't lie. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they hit us from that side." Reed cursed under his breath. "We're sitting ducks out here." "Not if we move first," Sarah replied. Her tone was calm, but her eyes burned with calculation. She turned back to the group. "All right, listen up." Her voice carried over the sand like a whip crack. "We're not dying in this ditch. We're going to reposition along the south ridge. It's narrow, but it gives us cover and height. We'll use the 2 operational Humvees as shields, move the wounded inside, and set a perimeter." No one argued. The soldier's eyes flicked toward her, searching for confidence, and finding it. Sarah grabbed a map from her vest and spread it against the Humvee's hood. She pointed with a gloved finger. "Here, the creek bed curves east. That's our escape route if this turns worse. We'll hold here for as long as it takes. Once we get Combs back, I'll call in an evac." Private Cole frowned. "Captain, what if they've jammed everything?" "Then," she said, glancing toward the ridge, "we unjam it." Her words carried no hesitation. Soldiers exchanged looks, the kind that silently say, "She has a plan, we follow." "Move," Sarah ordered. They sprang into action. Boots pounded over sand and gravel as the small unit began pushing the remaining vehicles toward the southern slope. Engines roared weakly. The Humvees were half functional, but they still moved. Dust clouds rose behind them as the group began to relocate under cover fire. Sarah ran alongside the convoy, rifle slung across her back, radio headset clipped to her vest. Every movement was calculated, efficient. Even as bullets occasionally cracked in the distance, her pace never faltered. She wasn't just commanding, she was leading from the front. They reached the base of the ridge just as gunfire erupted again. The enemy had spotted their movement. "Positions!" Sarah shouted. "Ridge line, suppressing fire, now!" The .50 cal opened up first, its heavy roar echoing across the desert. Then rifles joined in, short, controlled bursts. Sarah crouched beside Cole, sighted her rifle, and picked off a moving shadow at the ridge crest. The target fell instantly. "Good shot, Captain," Cole said breathlessly. "Don't compliment me, shoot." She barked. The ground trembled as another explosion hit near their old position. Dust and debris filled the air. Sarah didn't look back. She already knew what it meant. The enemy had destroyed where they used to be. They had guessed wrong. That bought them precious seconds. She used the brief lull to regroup. "Reed, mount that heavy gun on vehicle 2. I want full coverage east to south." "Yes, ma'am." "Martinez, check the wounded. Move anyone critical to the second vehicle. I need them stable before we make our next push." "Yes, Captain." The soldiers obeyed without hesitation now. The difference was visible. Their movements sharper, more disciplined, fueled by purpose. They weren't just reacting anymore. They were following a leader. Sarah ducked behind a rock outcrop and opened her field tablet. The GPS still flickered despite the jamming. The jammer signal seemed strongest from the northwest ridge. "There you are," she whispered. If she could destroy that, Combs might reopen. "Cole," she shouted. "Get the RPG from the rear compartment." He blinked. "We have an RPG?" She gave a half-smile. "Always plan for overkill." Cole retrieved the launcher, heavy and sand-caked. Sarah steadied it on the rock, took aim toward the ridge where the interference signal spiked strongest, and fired. The rocket streaked across the sky, a screaming arc of smoke and flame. It hit, and for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the ridge exploded in a shower of dirt and metal. The radio crackled with sudden static, but this time it wasn't jammed static. A voice came through, faint but real. "Alpha 3, this is command. Do you copy?" "Over." Sarah exhaled, heart hammering. "Command, this is Captain Donovan, Alpha 3. We are under live hostile engagement. Repeat, this is not a drill. Coordinates transmitting now. Copy that, Captain? Standby QRF is en route. ETA 45 minutes. 45 minutes. An eternity in combat. But at least now, they weren't alone." "Copy," Sarah replied. "We'll hold." The moment she said it, the enemy struck again, harder this time. Machine guns tore through the dust, bullets pinging off metal. "Contact West Ridge?" Martinez shouted. Sarah ducked, firing controlled bursts in return. "Everyone hold your ground. Make every bullet count." The firefight intensified, echoing across the canyon. Sand blasted the soldiers' faces, shell casings littered the ground. Through it all, Sarah moved like she'd rehearsed every second. She checked every position, adjusted every line of fire, encouraged every man who faltered. "Stay with me. Keep your eyes on the ridge." She yelled, voice hoarse but unwavering. She was everywhere, returning fire, dragging a wounded soldier to safety, throwing fresh magazines to gunners. Fear no longer had room to breathe. Her soldiers followed her commands with mechanical precision. Cole shouted from behind the mounted gun, "They're falling back, Captain." Sarah looked up through the swirling smoke. He was right. Dark shapes were retreating across the ridgeline, dragging their own casualties. She exhaled slowly. For the first time in hours, the battlefield fell into uneasy quiet. "Cease fire," she ordered. The echo of her voice faded, leaving only the crackle of burning fuel and the groans of the wounded. Sarah lowered her rifle, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was ebbing. Reed approached her, face streaked with sweat and soot. "Captain, I think you just saved all of us." Sarah gave a tired, crooked smile. "Not yet. They'll be back, and next time they'll be angry." She turned to her men, raising her voice once more. "We're not out of this fight. Reinforcements are 45 minutes away. Until then, this ridge is ours. We hold, we fight smart. We fight together." A chorus of weary but determined voices answered, "Yes, ma'am." The Nevada sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the desert floor. The heat began to fade, replaced by the cold wind of dusk. The smell of smoke lingered heavy in the air, a reminder of how close they'd come to annihilation. But as Sarah stood on that ridge, watching her soldiers reload and re-barricade their positions, she felt something shift. Moments ago, they were a scattered, frightened convoy. Now, under her command, they were a unit. And the woman the military had once dismissed as too intense for command had just taken charge of hell and turned it into order. Far off on the horizon, the enemy's silhouettes regrouped for another attack. Sarah watched them through her scope and whispered almost to herself, "Come on, then." The battle wasn't over. But for the first time, it was on her terms. The desert settled into a tense silence, but Sarah Donovan knew better. Silence after a firefight in the Nevada basin was never a gift. It was a warning. She crouched behind the rear Humvee, every muscle taut, eyes scanning every ridge, every rocky outcrop, every shadow. The sun had begun to dip low, casting long streaks of orange across the sand. Smoke from the destroyed vehicles twisted in the wind, forming ghostly shapes that flickered across her vision. Her soldiers were regrouping, ammunition counted, positions reestablished, but Sarah's gut told her the worst wasn't over. Through her binoculars, she peered up at the ridge where the attack had first begun. Her stomach sank. Something was off. The enemy was not moving like a training unit. No hesitation, no noise discipline breaking. Their formation was tight, precise, coordinated, highly trained. She lowered the binoculars. The movement had to be deliberate. This wasn't a simulation gone wrong. This was an ambush planned with meticulous care. Private Cole stumbled next to her, dust caking his face, rifle clutched tight. "Captain, they're regrouping. Looks like they're, I don't know, professional." Sarah didn't need to hear it. She already knew. Professional mercenaries. Ex-military contractors. People who didn't blink under fire, who planned ambushes like chess moves, who exploited every weakness. And right now, they had a major advantage: height, numbers, and surprise. "Cole," she said softly, "tell Martinez and Red to tighten the perimeter and cover all angles. Don't leave a blind spot." He nodded, moving quickly. Sarah crouched low and pulled the tablet from her vest. The jamming signal was still active, stronger than before, centered somewhere along the northwest ridge. Whoever these attackers were, they had anticipated their movements. They knew every route, every vehicle's vulnerability. This was no random strike. She transmitted a coded message into the emergency channel. Alpha 3 requesting situation update. Unknown hostiles. Live fire. Coordinates transmitted. Over. Nothing but static. The jamming was deliberate. Whoever they were, they didn't want backup, at least not yet. A faint shimmer on the ridge caught her eye. A small drone hovered silently, almost invisible against the burning sky. It wasn't a training drone. It was military grade, fitted with a camera. The enemy was watching. They were calculating. Every movement, every cover position, every reaction recorded and transmitted. Sarah's heart pounded. "They're tracking us," she whispered. "Everything we do, they know." A sudden movement to her left made her spin around, rifle raised. 2 soldiers were crawling, dragging a wounded comrade between the vehicles. They'd seen her move and assumed she'd direct the counterattack. But Sarah realized she couldn't rely on anyone else to identify the threat. She had to see it herself. She scanned the terrain again and spotted the ridge's crest. Figures appeared, armed, moving with deadly precision. Their weapons glinted in the fading light. Not more than 25, maybe 30, but each one trained. Calculated. Intent on killing every soldier in sight. Sarah felt a chill that wasn't from the desert wind. They weren't just trying to incapacitate her unit. They were testing their own efficiency, their lethality, their dominance. And right now, her convoy was the unwilling target. She crouched lower, breathing through her nose, and whispered orders. "Martinez, focus south and east. Reed, watch west. Cole, stay with me. We're not reacting, we're anticipating." The soldiers moved with her, every step guided by the calm authority that had kept them alive before. Sarah knew their lives depended on foresight, not luck. Another figure emerged from the ridge, taller, helmeted differently, carrying a radio device. This was clearly the commander, directing the attack. The realization struck Sarah like a hammer. Whoever they were organized, disciplined, and coordinated by someone experienced in battlefield strategy. Her mind raced. If she could neutralize the COM signal, they could level the playing field, maybe even turn the ambush back on them. "Cole," she said, pointing toward the faint hum of the drone. "Get the RPG ready. We're taking out their eyes first. Then we neutralize the jammer." He hesitated. "Are you sure, Captain?" She gave him a sharp look. "Positive. We're already in the fight. Delay and we lose." He moved into position, hands shaking but steady. Sarah scanned the ridge one last time. Shadows shifted constantly, soldiers moving like chess pieces under a master's hand. Every decision she made from this point forward could mean survival or death. She grabbed a pair of binoculars again. Something else caught her eye. Behind the ridge, a small column of vehicles was moving. Armored, dark-painted, heavily armed. This was no isolated attack. These mercenaries had support, logistics, and escape planned. The exercise she had signed up for had become a battlefield with strategic depth, and she was now in command of the only defending force. Her soldiers were watching her. Private Cole looked to her for guidance. Martinez adjusted his aim. Reed readied the heavy gun. They waited for her direction, for a plan. "Listen carefully," Sarah said, voice low but carrying weight. "We are outnumbered. They have height, mobility, and firepower. But they don't know us. They don't know how we move, how we fight, how we survive. That's our advantage. We fight smart. We fight together. We set traps. We control their mistakes. Understood? A chorus of nods and murmured affirmatives came back. Sarah felt a surge of calm amid the storm. She would no longer wait for orders. The lieutenant had frozen. Command was hers. And the enemy, no matter how professional, would learn soon enough that Captain Sarah Donovan didn't just survive. She adapted, she struck, and she would make them pay for every bullet fired. She turned her attention back to the ridge. The commander figure was still moving, barking orders, adjusting his troops. She estimated the distance, 300 meters to the nearest enemy. The others spread, trying to flank from the south. Her mind raced through options, strategies, contingencies. Smoke grenades, suppressive fire, heavy weapons. Every tool had a purpose. She would lead a counterattack, coordinated, precise, and brutal. But first, she had to survive the next 5 minutes. "Cole," she whispered, "smoke round in 3, 2, 1. A plume of gray smoke erupted from the ridge's side, obscuring the enemy's view just enough for Sarah's team to shift positions. Martinez fired controlled bursts, keeping enemy heads down. Reed moved the heavy gun to cover the western approach. It worked. The ridge line faltered, giving her soldiers breathing room. She exhaled slowly. That was just a glimpse of what was possible. If they stayed smart, stayed coordinated, stayed alive, they could turn this ambush into a fight they controlled. Sarah looked at the horizon as the sun dipped further. Red streaks painted the sky, a reminder that this was no drill, no simulation. It was real. And now she knew the truth. The enemy wasn't testing her. They were hunting her. But Sarah Donovan was not prey. She was a predator. And this ambush, meticulously planned and executed, was about to meet its match. The Nevada desert was a furnace of heat, smoke, and sand, but for Captain Sarah Donovan, there was no time to notice it. Every sense screamed danger. The distant clatter of bullets, the line of drones overhead, the faint rumble of enemy movement. And yet, in the chaos, a cold clarity settled over her. She had a plan. She crouched behind the battered Humvee, the sand sticking to sweat-slicked skin, rifle at the ready. Her soldiers were tense, but holding positions, guided entirely by her commands. Martinez's rifle spat fire toward the southern ridge. Reed's mounted heavy gun covered the west flank, and Private Cole was ready with the RPG. All that remained was action, decisive, coordinated action. Her binoculars scanned the ridge again. The enemy was regrouping, moving in tight formation under the fading sun. Their commander figure appeared again, issuing precise orders. They were trained, lethal, and confident. But Sarah now knew something they didn't. The terrain, the sand, the cover, and the unpredictability of her team. She called out quickly, "Cole, the drone hit it first. Martinez, keep their heads down. Reed, suppress the west flank." The RPG fired. A streak of smoke and fire arced through the sky and struck the hovering drone. It spiraled out of control, crashing into the rocky terrain. The enemy commander cursed, shouting into his radio. That signal, that crucial observation, had been their advantage, now gone. "Good," Sarah muttered. "Now we move." She sprinted low across the sand, rifle slung and eyes on her team. "Martinez, advance 30 meters east. Take the high cover near the creek bend. Cole, follow me. Reed, provide suppressive fire." Bullets screamed past her head, kicking up dirt, sand, and shards of metal. A tracer round ricocheted near her shoulder, scorching her vest. Every step was measured, forward, crouch, forward, like a deadly dance with the desert. The wounded were stabilized and secured in the rear Humvee. Sarah glanced at them, nodding. "Stay put. We're taking the fight to them." The soldiers obeyed, hearts racing, adrenaline flooding their veins. Fear was still there, but under Sarah's calm, deliberate control, it became energy, sharpened focus rather than panic. As they approached the creek bed, the enemy finally realized they were moving, and fire erupted in a coordinated hailstorm from the ridge. Bullets struck the sand around them, embedding in rocks, shattering small dust clouds. Sarah pressed herself to the ground, analyzing every shadow. Then she spotted the weak point, a narrow pass in the ridge where the enemy's flank was overextended. "Reed!" she shouted. "Suppressive fire on the north ridge. Focus there. Martinez and I are moving through the pass." Reed responded instantly, the heavy .50 cal thunder ripping across the desert. Enemy heads ducked, firing slowed. "Move," Sarah ordered. She and Martinez sprinted low through the rocky pass, sand whipping at their faces. The enemy didn't expect movement through this gap. They had concentrated their attention on the convoy's previous location. For a heartbeat, it felt impossible. Each step was met with gunfire, bullets tearing through the rocks around them. Martinez grunted as he fired back at approaching silhouettes. Sarah lobbed smoke grenades to obscure their advance. One of the grenades landed just right, filling the pass with a thick cloud that muffled enemy sight lines. Then, from the ridge ahead, Sarah caught sight of the enemy commander moving toward a strategic position, likely planning to encircle them completely. She didn't hesitate. "Martinez, flank left. I'm taking the ridge now." Martinez understood immediately. They split, moving like shadows, invisible in the smoke. Sarah's boots pounded the sand, keeping low as she approached the rocks above the narrow pass. She sighted her rifle, steadying her aim. A single shot, precise, calculated, and the commander fell, staggering backward. Communications dropped instantly from the enemy line as one of their eyes on the battlefield was eliminated. Confusion rippled through the opposing force. Sarah didn't wait. She waved Martinez up, and together they moved to higher ground. From here, the desert stretched out below, the perfect vantage point. She quickly scanned the remaining enemies. They were regrouping, trying to flank from both east and south. But the narrow ridge controlled the angles, and Sarah had secured it. "Cole," she shouted. "Prepare the RPG East Ridge. Reed heavier suppression on west. Everyone else hold positions." The coordinated attack began. The RPG streaked across the sky, striking the eastern ridge with a thunderous impact. Enemy soldiers screamed as their cover collapsed, sand and rock flying in all directions. Reed's heavy gun chewed into the west flank, forcing more retreating enemy soldiers to take cover. Sarah's team moved like clockwork, every soldier responding instantly to her orders, firing with precision, using cover, repositioning when necessary. The tide of the battle shifted. The attackers were no longer dictating the fight. They were reacting. Confusion replaced confidence. They hesitated, giving Sarah's team the crucial seconds they needed. She climbed higher, adjusting her aim, picking off exposed targets. Martinez covered the advance, moving between rocks and firing methodically. Cole followed with the RPG, taking out one last enemy machine position. Within minutes, the battlefield looked different. Enemy lines were breaking. Shouts of frustration echoed across the ridges. Bullets still flew, but the chaos that had pinned her convoy earlier was now turned against their attackers. Sarah caught her breath, heart pounding. She scanned the horizon. Her soldiers were battered, dusty, exhausted, but alive. More importantly, they were coordinated, holding the advantage they hadn't had minutes before. "Hold your positions," she barked. "Do not give them ground. Focus fire on any regrouping units." The attackers tried one last desperate push, moving from cover to cover, but Sarah's team anticipated every step. They were trained, yes, but Sarah's leadership made them faster, smarter, more lethal than any simulation could account for. And then, the final stroke. Sarah grabbed another smoke grenade, lobbed it across the remaining enemy approach, and signaled the team to push. Suppressive fire, grenade bursts, and precise rifle shots turned the tide. The enemy broke. They ran, retreating, scattering, trying to escape the ridge that had once given them dominance. Sarah lowered her rifle, chest heaving as her soldiers regrouped. Every position was held. Every soldier accounted for. The ridge, once a death trap, was now theirs. For the first time, Sarah felt a spark of relief. The ambush wasn't over. There could be reinforcements, but momentum had shifted. The chaos of the first attack had been contained. Survival was no longer just reaction. They had control. Private Cole approached. Dirt and blood streaked on his face. "Captain, we did it. We actually did it." Sarah shook her head, eyes still on the ridge. "Not yet. We've just survived the turning point. They'll regroup. They'll learn. But we've bought ourselves time. And in this fight, time is everything." She turned to the remaining soldiers, voice steady, commanding. "We hold here. We fortify. Every shot counts. Every second counts. Do you understand?" "Sir, ma'am." The unit responded in unison. Sarah exhaled slowly, letting the adrenaline ebb slightly. For the first time, she allowed herself a glimpse of what was possible. They weren't just surviving, they were fighting back. And from this ridge, with her team behind her, Sarah Donovan knew that the ambushers, no matter how skilled, would have to fight on her terms from now on. The sun sank behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the desert. Smoke still rose from the destroyed Humvees, but the battlefield had changed. The momentum was hers. For the first time since the ambush began, Sarah smiled faintly. The fight wasn't over, but the turning point had been claimed. And in that moment, she knew her soldiers would follow her anywhere. The Nevada desert was settling into an uneasy twilight, the sun dipping behind distant mountains, casting jagged shadows across the blood-streaked sand. Smoke from destroyed Humvees curled into the sky, still carrying the acrid stench of burned rubber and hot metal. Captain Sarah Donovan crouched behind the southern ridge, rifle at the ready, scanning the remaining enemy positions with sharp, calculating eyes. Her team, battered but resolute, had regrouped under her command. Private Cole, Martinez, and Corporal Reed were poised and disciplined, waiting for her orders. Every soldier had scars, minor cuts, bruises, sweat-soaked uniforms, and dust-caked faces. But every one of them had survived the ambush. Survival was one thing. Dominating the fight was another. And Sarah intended to do both. She raised her field tablet and reviewed the remaining enemy formations. About 25 soldiers, scattered across two ridges and the valley below. They had regrouped, but panic lingered in their movements. Sarah's pulse steadied. The ambush had been expertly planned, but she had gained the high ground, the initiative, and the element of surprise. "We're moving now," she whispered, voice sharp and precise. "They think they've regained control. We're about to show them who's really running this fight." Cole looked uneasy. "Captain, they're still professional. They've got the numbers, and we're out of grenades." Sarah shook her head. "Numbers mean nothing if they're reacting, and we're controlling the tempo. Follow my lead, and we end this on our terms." She motioned for Martinez and Reed to cover the eastern ridge. "Suppressive fire until I say cease. Do not let them peek over the rocks. Cole, follow me. We're going through the pass to the valley below. Reed, you're covering west. Martinez east. Everyone else, fall into my formation." The team moved like shadows through the smoke, dust swirling around them as bullets zipped overhead. Sarah led the way, crouched low, eyes scanning for enemy movement. Every step was precise, every action deliberate. They approached the narrow pass that had previously been a trap, but now served as a gateway to the valley. Sarah lobbed a smoke grenade to obscure their movement. Thick gray clouds enveloped the pass, muffling their advance and disorienting the enemy. From this angle, they had a chance to flank the northern ridge, the key to turning the battle. "Move," she barked. Cole sprinted beside her, RPG ready. Martinez provided covering fire, his rifle spitting tracer rounds at the ridge above. Reed's heavy gun roared from their rear, suppressing westward movement. As they crested the ridge, Sarah caught sight of the enemy commander, the same figure who had orchestrated the ambush. He was issuing orders, trying to coordinate a defense. She didn't hesitate. "Cole, target the command post." She shouted. The RPG streaked across the twilight sky, landing near the commander's position. A fiery explosion ripped through the rocks, sending dust and debris flying. The commander staggered, but remained alive. The enemy's coordination faltered immediately. "Now," Sarah yelled. The team surged forward. Suppressive fire from Reed and Martinez pinned enemy soldiers, while Sarah led the assault down into the valley. The terrain gave them cover, jagged rocks, boulders, and scattered brush, but it also slowed their advance. Every step demanded precision, courage, and timing. Bullets cracked overhead, kicking up sand and dust. Sarah fired controlled bursts, taking down anyone who exposed themselves. Martinez and Reed moved with fluid efficiency, covering the flanks, forcing the enemy to retreat. "Focus fire on any regrouping units," Sarah ordered, voice unwavering. The enemy tried to counterattack, but Sarah's team had seized the initiative. They were coordinated, lethal, and operating with a single mind, her mind. The attackers began to scatter, unable to predict the next movement. Every attempt to regroup was met with a hail of bullets and suppressive fire. Sarah spotted another cluster of enemies, attempting to flank east. She signaled Martinez. "Suppress! Now!" Martinez's rifle roared, tearing into the eastern flank. The attackers froze, giving Sarah the opening she needed. She sprinted toward the cluster, throwing smoke grenades and firing with pinpoint accuracy. Soldiers dropped, retreating in confusion. "Reed, shift west, cut them off." She barked. Reed's heavy gun roared to life, forcing the remaining enemy to retreat further into the valley. Cole fired another RPG at a rocky outcrop that had been used as cover, collapsing it and cutting off their line of escape. The tide of the battle had turned. The attackers were no longer dictating the fight. They were reacting to every move Sarah and her team made. Sarah's heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic had no place here. Every soldier's life depended on her control, her timing, her decisions. She climbed atop a boulder, giving herself a better vantage point. Through her scope, she spotted the last remaining enemy forces, 5 soldiers attempting to regroup near the northern ridge. They had the high ground, but were isolated, vulnerable. "Martinez, cover the ridge," she shouted. "Cole and I are taking them out." The two advanced, moving low, firing in unison. Bullets tore through rocks and sand, hitting the enemy before they could react. One by one, the attackers fell, scrambling in disarray. The northern ridge was now under Sarah's control. She exhaled, adrenaline still pumping. The battlefield had shifted completely. The ambushers, highly trained and coordinated, were defeated, scattered, disoriented, and demoralized. Her team regrouped around her, each soldier exhausted but alive. Private Cole looked at her, awe and relief on his face. "Captain, we did it." We actually turned it around. Sarah shook her head. Not yet. We've regained control, but this isn't over. We need to secure the area, treat the wounded, and prepare for reinforcements. Stay alert. She scanned the valley. Smoke rose from destroyed Humvees. Sand clung to the survivors, and the air smelled of cordite and dust. But for the first time since the ambush began, she felt a sense of victory. They had survived the impossible. They had regained control. And it was all because she had taken command when others faltered. Secure positions, she ordered. Prepare for evac. Command should be able to reach us now. Minutes later, her headset crackled. Alpha 3, this is command. Reinforcements are 5 minutes out. Situation under control? Sarah's voice was steady, commanding. Affirmative. Enemy neutralized. Remaining units secure. Prepare extraction. She lowered her rifle, surveying her team. Every soldier was alive, breathing, and standing because of her decisions, her leadership, her courage. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the desert bathed in twilight. Smoke curled into the sky, wind whispered across the sand, and the echoes of the ambush faded into the distance. Captain Sarah Donovan stood tall, rifle slung, eyes on the horizon. The battle was over, for now. But the lesson was clear. Courage, decisiveness, and leadership could turn the tide, even when outnumbered and under fire. And she had proven it. The desert night settled over the Nevada basin like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Shadows stretched across the scorched sand, twisted wreckage, and jagged rocks. Captain Sarah Donovan crouched behind the ridge, rifle in hand, surveying the valley. Every movement, every distant sound could conceal a final threat. The ambush was over, the enemy scattered or neutralized, but survival was never guaranteed until extraction arrived. Her team was exhausted but alive. Private Cole leaned against a boulder, breathing hard, sweat and grime streaking his face. Martinez and Reed checked their weapons and positions, scanning the darkening horizon for any sign of enemy regrouping. The wounded had been stabilized. Makeshift tourniquets, medkits, and her steady instructions had kept them alive. Sarah felt the weight of the battlefield on her shoulders. The adrenaline had ebbed slightly, leaving fatigue and a gnawing tension. Every decision, every movement, had determined life or death for the soldiers under her command. And now the reckoning had come. Her headset crackled. Alpha 3, this is command. Reinforcements ETA 5 minutes. Situation stable? Sarah's voice was steady, crisp. Affirmative. Enemy neutralized. All personnel accounted for. Prepare extraction at coordinates sent. Over. Static filled the line for a heartbeat, then a faint confirmation. Copy that, Captain. Hang tight. Evic inbound. She lowered the radio, glancing at her soldiers. Team, extraction is 5 minutes out. Stay alert. This isn't over until we're in the bird and clear of the valley. Cole's eyes flicked toward the broken vehicles scattered across the sand. Captain, what about the bodies? The ones we couldn't move? Sarah's jaw tightened. We'll report them to command. Right now, survival is priority. Every second counts until we're out of this basin. The valley was eerily quiet. Only the faint sound of wind, the distant creak of sand against wreckage, and the occasional groan from the wounded broke the stillness. But Sarah knew better. The enemy could be anywhere, or anywhere they might regroup. She scanned the ridge again, binoculars steady, noting every movement, every shadow. Reed, she said, cover the western flank. Martinez, east. Cole and I will secure the north ridge for visual clearance for extraction. The soldiers nodded, obeying without hesitation. They moved like a unit, each action precise, coordinated, a sharp contrast to the chaos of hours earlier. Sarah's leadership had transformed fear into efficiency, panic into calculated action. Cole followed her silently, RPG at the ready. As they crested the northern ridge, the desert spread out below them. Burned-out Humvees, scattered equipment, the faint forms of enemy casualties. But most importantly, the valley was clear enough for the incoming extraction. She lowered her binoculars and signaled Reed and Martinez. Visual confirmation. Extraction can land. Maintain suppression until the bird arrives. Any remaining hostiles, neutralize. Minutes stretched like hours. Every second Sarah watched the horizon, tension clawing at her chest. The thought of what might happen if enemy reinforcements appeared kept her senses razor-sharp. Then, the distant thrum of rotors reached her ears, low at first, then growing louder. The extraction Black Hawk appeared on the horizon, its silhouette cutting against the twilight sky. Relief rippled through her team, but Sarah's focus didn't waver. The landing zone had to be secured, wounded first, then the rest of the team. Positions. She barked. Reed, cover west. Martinez, east. Cole, with me. Wounded on the first Humvee, move them to the LZ. The soldiers obeyed, moving with precision. Sarah directed each step, checking the perimeter, watching for any sign of enemy interference. As the helicopter descended, sand and dust kicked up violently, obscuring visibility. She counted each soldier as they moved toward the LZ. The wounded were carefully lifted onto stretchers, secured inside first. Captain, Cole shouted over the rotor wash. All clear on north and west. Good. Keep positions until everyone is aboard. Sarah climbed into the rear of the Black Hawk last, scanning the valley below. The sun had disappeared completely, leaving only shadows and the faint glow of fires scattered across the battlefield. Inside the helicopter, the team was quiet, exhausted, and covered in dirt and blood. Sarah looked around at their faces, young men and women who had survived chaos, who had followed her lead under impossible circumstances. A voice crackled over the radio again. Alpha 3, this is command. Well done, Captain Donovan. Situation debrief upon return. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment. Survival, leadership, control. She had accomplished all three under fire. But the battlefield would never forget what had happened here, nor would she. The hum of the helicopter filled the silence as they rose above the valley. Below, the desert stretched endlessly, littered with the remnants of a fight that could have ended in disaster. She felt the weight of responsibility. Every choice, every order, every action had carried consequences. Martinez broke the silence first. Captain, you saved us out there. All of us? Sarah shook her head. We saved ourselves. I just made sure we had a plan. Cole, still catching his breath, added, plan or not. You led. That's what mattered. She offered a faint smile. Leadership was never about personal glory. It was about responsibility, decisiveness, and staying calm when everything around you falls apart. The helicopter banked over the desert, lights from the base approaching. Sarah watched the ground below, reflecting on the ambush. It had been precise, deadly, and designed to break them. But it had failed. The attackers had underestimated her, underestimated the team, underestimated the importance of leadership under fire. She thought of the soldiers she had lost, the ones who didn't make it, and silently vowed their sacrifices would not be in vain. Captain, Command's voice came over the radio again. Prepare for debrief and psychological evaluation for all personnel. We'll also investigate the attackers. This was no ordinary ambush. Sarah nodded silently. She already knew. The professionalism, the coordination, the jamming, and the drones. This was deliberate, tactical, and lethal. Whoever had orchestrated it had knowledge of military procedures, tactics, and vulnerabilities. This ambush was more than just an attack. It was a test. As the Black Hawk landed at the base, the team disembarked, wounded first, then the rest. Sarah led them to the triage and debrief area, ensuring every soldier was accounted for, stabilized, and treated. She gave concise instructions, checked on the wounded personally, and finally allowed herself to take a deep breath. The debrief would be long. Questions, reports, and analysis would follow. But for now, her soldiers were safe, alive, and prepared to continue because of her leadership. Standing in the dim light of the base, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and lingering tension. The ambush had tested everything: her decision-making, courage, composure, and leadership. But she had passed. Not because of luck, but because she had controlled chaos, turned fear into action, and led by example. She looked around at her team, battered and bruised, yet alive. For every bullet, every scream, every moment of terror in the desert, they had survived. And she had turned the tide when all seemed lost. The extraction was complete, the battlefield left behind. But the memory of the ambush, the faces of her team, and the lessons learned would stay with her forever. Captain Sarah Donovan had faced the impossible, assumed command under fire, and turned a deadly ambush into a story of survival, leadership, and victory. And as the night settled over the base, she knew one thing: no matter what the next mission brought, she and her team would be ready, because outnumbered or under fire, they would never falter again. The morning after the ambush, the Nevada desert was calm again, almost deceptively serene. The sun rose over the distant ridges, painting the scorched sand and scattered debris with pale gold. Captain Sarah Donovan sat in a makeshift debrief room at the base, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the space. Behind her, her team leaned against walls, medics attending to minor injuries, while a sense of exhaustion lingered like a heavy fog. Command officials filtered into the room, seasoned officers with crisp uniforms, their expressions a mix of concern, curiosity, and respect. They had reviewed initial reports from the battlefield, but Sarah knew the debrief would be thorough. Every decision, every maneuver, every order she had given under fire would be scrutinized. And she welcomed it. "Captain Donovan," began Colonel Hayes, a veteran with decades of experience, "we've reviewed the preliminary reports, but we need your account of what happened from first contact to extraction." Sarah straightened, eyes steady. "Sir, from the moment we were ambushed, my priority was survival and maintaining command. Lieutenant Harris froze early in the engagement, so responsibility fell to me. I assessed enemy movements, organized suppressive fire, repositioned our wounded, and coordinated countermeasures to regain the initiative. The enemy was professional, coordinated, and heavily armed. But we used terrain advantage, smoke, and flanking maneuvers to disrupt their command structure." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Every officer in the room listened intently, some nodding subtly. "Continue," Colonel Hayes prompted. "The turning point came when we neutralized the drone and the enemy commander coordinating their attack," she said. "From that moment, our team gained control. We executed a counterattack using coordinated fire, flanking maneuvers, and heavy suppression. All remaining units were accounted for. Extraction was executed successfully without further casualties." A hush fell over the room. The report was precise, tactical, and complete, a chronicle of leadership under fire. The colonel leaned back, steepling his hands. "Captain Donovan," he said slowly, "the chain of events you described is textbook for leadership under extreme conditions. You assumed command under duress, maintained morale, and executed a counteroffensive that turned a near disaster into a decisive tactical advantage. Your team survived because of your actions. Sarah allowed herself a small nod. The words were gratifying, but her mind drifted to her soldiers, exhausted and battered, but alive. Recognition was secondary. The fact they had survived, intact, was all that truly mattered. Colonel Has continued. Reports indicate the enemy's professionalism was exceptional. They anticipated conventional maneuvers, used electronic jamming, and coordinated aerial surveillance. Despite this, you exploited weaknesses in terrain, movement, and command structure to neutralize them. How do you assess the operational success? Sarah exhaled slowly. Success isn't measured by the defeat of the enemy alone, sir. It's measured by survival, cohesion, and the ability to control chaos. Every soldier followed orders, adapted, and maintained discipline because leadership remained decisive. Without control at the critical moments, survival would have been impossible. Operational success, in my view, is that we retained initiative under overwhelming circumstances and emerged intact. Colonel Hayes smiled faintly, impressed by her composure. Your assessment is both insightful and accurate. This incident will be studied as a case study in leadership under fire. He paused, then added, Captain Donovan, commendations are in order for you and your team. The ability to take command, turn a disastrous ambush into a tactical victory, and ensure the safety of every soldier present is remarkable. Sarah's lips curved into a modest smile. Thank you, sir. The team performed flawlessly. My actions were possible only because every soldier trusted and executed their role. They deserve every commendation alongside me. Colonel Hayes nodded. Indeed, that kind of cohesion is rare, especially under extreme conditions. It's a testament to your leadership and their professionalism. After the debrief, Sarah met privately with her team. Each soldier, Cole, Martinez, Reed, and the others, was quiet, reflective, but visibly proud. Their faces, streaked with sand and sweat, were finally free of tension. You all performed extraordinarily, Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Every maneuver, every cover, every suppressive fire action saved lives today. You trusted me and each other. That trust turned a nightmare into survival. Private Cole swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. Captain, we wouldn't have made it without you. You never faltered. Sarah shook her head. We all faltered at some point. I just made sure we got back on track. Leadership is about taking responsibility, yes, but it's about trust, coordination, and courage under pressure. And you all showed that. Corporal Reed added quietly, I didn't think I'd survive that first hour. But following you, we adapted, we fought smart, and we lived. You taught us what leadership really is. Sarah exhaled slowly. Her team's words were not for accolades, but affirmation that the lessons of the battlefield had been learned. Survival was never about numbers alone, but about leadership, cohesion, and determination. Later that day, as the soldiers received their medical treatment and rest, Sarah walked through the base's training ground. She reflected on the ambush, the chaos, the terror, and the resilience. Each soldier's face lingered in her memory, a reminder of the weight of command and the cost of leadership under fire. She realized something fundamental. The battlefield tested more than physical skill. It tested composure, decision-making, adaptability, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. And it was those qualities that had saved her team, turning the ambush into a story of survival and tactical brilliance. By evening, the reports were filed, commendations processed, and reinforcements debriefed. The enemy had vanished into the desert, their intentions unclear but neutralized for the moment. Sarah's actions would be recorded, studied, and honored. But more importantly, she had instilled confidence in her soldiers, that no matter how dire the circumstances, decisive leadership and unwavering courage could prevail. In the quiet hours, Sarah sat alone on the ridge overlooking the desert valley, now empty and silent. The burned Humvees, the twisted metal, and the scattered sand told the story of chaos, fear, and survival. She reflected on the day's events, the decisions made, and the lives saved. Her team had survived an ambush designed to destroy them. They had trusted her, adapted, and executed strategies that would now serve as lessons for others. And she had emerged not only as a survivor, but as a leader whose decisive actions under pressure would leave a lasting legacy. Captain Sarah Donovan's name would go down in the annals of military history, not for luck, but for courage, skill, and leadership. Her story would be told in training programs, tactical manuals, and by soldiers who understood what it meant to face overwhelming odds and come through alive together. The desert was quiet, but her legacy would echo far beyond the sands, beyond the ridge, and beyond the battlefield. Leadership, decisiveness, and courage had turned the tide, and Sarah Donovan had proven that one determined soldier could indeed change the course of a fight. As night fell, she stood, rifle slung, silhouetted against the fading light. Her team rested, the base safe, the mission complete. And in that moment, Captain Sarah Donovan allowed herself a rare sense of pride. Not for accolades, not for recognition, but for the lives she had saved and the leadership she had proven, under fire, outnumbered, and against all odds.